and good afternoon. Welcome to another session of Creative Corner. Today we are going to be learning Sewing 101. This workshop is going to be split into two sections. One is about handheld sewing, and then the second part we're going to actually be learning how to use a sewing machine. As I mentioned, we are going to be doing this workshop in two different parts. So the first part we're going to talk about hand sewing, and then a little bit later we'll go ahead and go on into our sewing machine. So in front of me I have two different, well, not two different, but two pieces of fabric. One of them I manually cut with a pair of scissors, and then the second one there's no cuts at all. I also have this pin cushion with a variety of pins, and then I also have some sewing needles. I also have a spool of silver thread, so that way we can work on this, and a pair of scissors. So as far as hand sewing goes, you're going to get a good length of thread. Now I chose silver because of the gray fabric, but depending on your fabric, you can choose the same color, or you can choose a different color. It is entirely up to you. But one of the most trickiest things about sewing that I find difficult is trying to get the thread inside the needle itself, just because the hole is a little bit small. And actually that didn't take me that much time at all. So once you thread the thread through the needle, what I like to do is I like to line up the ends of my thread using my fingers, and then slightly twisting the ends just so that way they're kind of conjoined together. And I like to do tie it by threading it by making the loop and then pulling the thread through that loop. And then I'll go back and separate the thread, the two pieces of thread, and then I'll do somewhat of a shoestring tie just to make the knot more durable. And with this hand sewing technique that I'm going to be showing you, you can use this to patch up some tears in your clothes. If you ever get rips or tears in your pants or your shirt, you can do this. But I have my thread and I have my threading needle, and we're going to go ahead and imagine one side is going to be the inside, and then the opposite side is going to be the outside of your fabric. So starting on the inside, what you're going to do is you're going to get your needle, thread it on one side, and I myself like to pull it all the way through. Now there is two different ways we can do this. I'm going to show you the first way halfway through this fabric, and then we'll do the second way the rest of the way. So the first way, if you're doing this from the outside, inside out, you want to make sure that your needle goes in on both sides of the tear. And one way is just to fold over the fabric and just make loops, and you're just going to go in and out of the fabric by pull, and just pull it. So this is just a temporary fix. You can do this if you're out and about and you get a tear. And then when you get home, you can just get out your sewing needle and sewing machine if you have one. I myself like to keep a travel size needle and thread with me. And the great way to make a travel size sewing kit is if you take pills for any medical condition, or if you know someone that does, and you can use discarded pill bottles to make sewing kits. You can also buy sewing kits as well, but this is just simple getting your thread and making loops to close the fabric. And as I mentioned, this is just a temporary fix. So if you're out and about, you get a tear, you can always just manually sew it. They also sell iron-on patches. So iron-on patches is just a piece of fabric with glue on the opposite side, and you just get your iron, put the two fabric pieces together, put the fabric glue down, and then just glue it together, and it seals shut. But as you can see, not too bad of a job. I closed up the part of it, but you can see that there's a slight fold where we started. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the second style. And so you're going to keep your fabric nice and flat. And instead of going loops, we are going to go from the inside and pull it, but not all the way. And you're going to be on the same side. So this technique is somewhat of a zigzag pattern, so you're just going back and forth to close the stitch, or close the tear. So you're just going to keep doing this, zigzagging back across. Make sure you don't pull it all the way. And then you're just going to keep doing that until you reach the very end of it. Okay. Now that I showed you the two basic techniques of closing up a tear, that's doing a loop around the fabric. You can also do the zigzag pattern, which I briefly showed. But this next portion, we're going to talk about if your clothes are too loose, there is a way to fix it. One way is to use fasteners, but if you don't have any fasteners, this is also a really neat trick. But imagine these are your pants. They're 2 sizes too big and you want to wear them. An easy fix to do it is, imagine your belt loops are up here and this is where your pocket is. You're going to get your needle and thread, start from the inside, start towards the top of where you want. Well, imagine your seam line is here on your pants. You're going to start as close to the seam line as possible. And then You just start out by making a triangle. So, let's see if I can do this. And every other stitch line, you're gonna slightly come in, but don't pull it just yet. So you're gonna keep these loose. And you're just gonna keep doing this, making a triangular shape. And this is also just a temporary fix too as well. You can also go back in with some fasteners. And then once you get to your desired length, all you have to do is just get your needle and thread and just pull it all the way. And there you have it. I know it seems a little messy on a piece of fabric, but it's going to look better when you do this on your pants. Okay, so now that we're done with hand sewing, our next part of our workshop is going to be all about sewing machines and the basics. So this is our work sewing machine and not my personal sewing machine. So mine's a little bit different. I'm going to show you the basics. Always consult your manual before you actually start sewing, because depending on the make and model, it's going to be different from what I'm going to show you. So you have this style, and you can change the different stitching. So right now I have it set to be a straight line. You can do zigzag pattern. It just depends on your personal sewing machine. But most sewing machines have the very basics, and that's the on button, which is going to be located on the side of on this particular one. This crank on the side makes the needle go up and down, so if you have any problems you can always backtrack. There's a switch right here that also reverses the overall sewing machine, so if you're going forward, you make a mistake, you can always go backwards. And then you have this internal mechanism which houses this little doohickey. I honestly don't know the name, official name for it. But inside there's this little spool casing. And then you also have your main spool. And on sewing machines, basically, it makes a zipper for the stitching, so that way it makes it nice and strong. In order to fill your spool, there is this little part of the sewing machine. If it's turned towards the needle, it's going to be drawing the thread to the needle. But if you flip it the other direction, it's just going to stay in place. And in order to refill the spool, all you have to do is just put it on the spool head. There's this little contraction that pulls out, so that way you can put your spool of thread. And then when you turn on your sewing machine, this part is going to turn, so that way you can refill your spool. And then all you need to do is put this spool into its little compartment, and you're going to place the shuttle back in its place until you hear it click. There we go. And you can go ahead and close that up. On this particular sewing machine, there's a little shelf that attaches to this piece, so that way you don't have to worry about it. Now all you have to do is just put your main spool back here. Okay. And you're going to get your thread, There's a little metal piece on the top, and this just to help keep it nice and flowy. But you're gonna bring it down. I can't see it from the side. Bring it around the dial, back up, and I can't see. So in the head, there is a little hook that brings the thread to the needle. So you have to bring it around the metal piece on the back, down and around the dial in the front, and hook it on that piece that's inside the machine. And then all you have to do is get the thread and put it in the needle itself. Which we can go ahead and do that. And unlike hand needles, the hole is located on the top. For sewing machines, it's it's located toward the bottom. And once you get it threaded, I like to pull my thread a little bit longer and kind of toward the back of the machine. But on the plate itself, there are these teeth that grab onto the fabric and pull it as you're sewing. And the little shuttle on the inside with the thread is going to bring the thread up and enclose the top of the thread so that way it makes the zipper. Today we are going to be sewing a nice little throw pillow that's going to be double layered. So the first layer itself is going to hold the cotton, and the second layer is going to be for aesthetic. But I already pre-cut my fabric, and the thing you can do is you can get straight pins, and you're just gonna put the straight pin straight through, so that way the fabric stays in place. And because we're working with a pillow, the internal part of it that holds the cotton could be slightly smaller. But the outside, when you're working with the outside fabric, you want to go ahead and work reverse side. So your pattern is going to be on the inside, and when you sew it, I'm going to show you how to flip it inside out so that way you can actually have the pillow. But let's go ahead and get started on the first line. So you're going to line up the corner of your fabric. There is a little lever that brings up the head, and you're just going to push it down. And ever so carefully, all you have to do is just turn on the machine. And mine got stuck. Because it's not grabbing the shuttle for some reason. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties, but my thread on top wasn't grabbing the shuttle in the bottom, so it wasn't creating the zipper. But we fixed it, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sew a straight line down one side, and then I'll show you how to flip it so that way we can do the next side. But this sewing machine is foot powered, so all you have to do is just press your foot on the doohickey on the bottom, and when you're doing this, make sure you're not pulling the fabric, because that can also break the needle on your sewing machine. And then we'll go keep going. So you want to keep the same tension on both the front part as well as the back part as you're going. And as you're moving along, you can go ahead and take the straight pins out. And we'll go ahead and do a close-up view here in a few seconds, so that way you can see the stitch pattern. And I'm nearing the corner. So when you get close to the corner, you're going to put your needle and push it down manually using the side of your sewing machine. And then all you need to do is lift up your little switch or lever, rotate your fabric, and then push it back down. And then you could just go ahead and keep going. Okay, so I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but I'll probably take a photo of the stitch work and post it on our social media so that way you can see. But you can see the black thread, and then the spool inside the shuttle, I have a different color thread, and you can see it created a zipper-like pattern. That way the thread is holding on to each other, so that way it's not going to come apart easily. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to time lapse the rest of the sewing process, so that way we can get on to the next section, and that's combining the inner part as well as the outer part. Okay, so we had a lot of technical difficulties, and I was gonna start stuffing this pillow. Um, Partly because I haven't sewed in quite a while, so the craft gods are against me. Um, when you're sewing using a sewing machine, uh, sometimes it can overheat. Sometimes it doesn't catch the shuttle inside the mechanism. There's a whole lot of different reasons why sometimes sewing doesn't work out. And I kind of wanted to show you that it started gobbling up the thread as well as the fabric, so the stitching wasn't coming out great. I tried to fix it off camera. It did not work, so I ended up just cutting most of the thread. There's a lot more than this. Yeah, like I said, just cut it and I started again. So I redid the stitch on the opposite side. So now that we have this little pocket, all you have to do is go ahead and flip the fabric inside out. Easier said than done. And if you have or like a chopstick or a wooden dowel, just so that way you can get the corners more nice and even. But we're just gonna flip this inside out. If I can find the last corner. And there we have the beginnings of our little throw pillow. And the rest of it I'm gonna hand sew to seal it shut. But before we go ahead and do that, I'm gonna make the outside cover. So the reason why I'm doing this in two separate parts is that this interior pocket is going to hold the fiber itself, and sometimes the fiber comes through the actual fabric, and to make sure that doesn't happen, I'm making the exterior pocket, which this is going to go inside of, just so that way, like I said, the fiber doesn't start coming out. So when you're working with patterns, there's going to be a bright color side, and there's also going to be a dull side. The dull side is going to be the interior, so what we did with this previous one, and then the bright side is going to go on the outside. So all I have to do is make sure that the two bright sides are on the inside. And if you have extra fabric, you're more than welcome to cut it. Otherwise, when you flip it inside out, it's going to be on the inside anyway, so you're not really going to see it. But I'm going to work with the outside. And again, I'm going to get my straight pins and just put in some pins so that way my fabric stays in place and it's not moving around on the sewing machine. If you want, you could just do one side, or you can do multiple sides. I'm going to go ahead and just keep doing this until I go all the way around. Now if you do any sewing, go ahead and put some of your sewing projects in the description below so we can take a look at them. I used to sew in high school, and that was a long time ago, roughly about 9 years ago. And so all this is just slowly coming back as we sew. Actually, I think I'm just going to do two sides and that's it. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and speed up the process on the sewing machine, and then I'll come back and talk with you here in a few moments. Okay, before we continue on with our project, I have my filler. So we're going to go ahead and fill our internal pocket. And all you have to do is just get small bunches at a time and just stuff it inside. I'm using a polyester fiber to fill the pillow. You can choose cotton or polyester, it's really up to you. But you're just going to stuff the pillow until it's completely full. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm grabbing sort of small bunches instead of grabbing large pieces, because it's easier to work with when you're stuffing. And if you have a wooden skewer or a dowel, you can use it to push the cotton into the corners. But we're just going to keep filling up this pillow. I'm just going to use my hands because I don't have a wooden dowel, and just push the polyester fiber into the corner itself. We have sort of a long way to go, so we're just going to keep stuffing. And you can always use 2 fingers to push your filler into the case itself. Makes it a little bit more easier. All you have to do is just push it into the corner. A couple more bunches and the pillow will be done, somewhat. You just keep adding until you're satisfied. My pillow's taking shape. And you can always use your fingers to kind of push around your filler. Make sure it's spread nice and evenly throughout your project that you're working on. Whether it be a pillow or a stuffed animal. You can also make a doll too if you want to. A blanket. If you're working with making a blanket, you're going to use the flat filler rather than the puffy filler, which I'm using. And you can get most of your crafting supplies from locally here in town at Walmart, Hobby Lobby. If you go to Albuquerque, you can go to Michael's. Any other craft store that sells filler and craft supplies. Okay, so once you're satisfied with how much filler you put in, the next thing we have to do is seal it. And all you have to do is get a needle and thread, and you're going to hand sew the hole shut. If you don't want to buy expensive filler, you can also use alternatives like uncooked beans, rice. Okay. And on this sew, I'm gonna do the zigzag pattern I showed you on the hand sewing, and we're just gonna go back and forth just to close up the hole. Of course, this one's a bit tricky because you have to sew it from the outside, but all you have to do is grab your two sides of your fabric and hold it still. So I'm making the little loop hand sew design that I showed you from the first section of this video. And we're almost there. Sewing requires a lot of patience, especially if you're hand sewing. But while I'm doing this week Saturday on the 16th, we are going to be having a virtual crafts hangout. And it doesn't matter if you're a sewer, if you're a crocheter, a quilter. If you want to join us, we're going to be sharing stories, we're going to trade food recipes, and just hang out while we do crafts. There is a registration that you can go to. It's available on our website, ofpl.online. I'll go ahead and put a direct link to the registration form in the description of this video. But once you're done with your hand sewing, all you have to do is just go ahead and put it inside your case. So I made this little pillowcase. And I probably could have done a better job at stuffing the interior pillow. But if you have extra fabric, you're more than welcome to cut it off. You can also seal it by sewing it shut. You can get a zipper and sew a zipper onto the side. It's entirely up to you how you want to do this. We also have a collection of sewing books here in the library to expand on the basics. Also, just get more sewing ideas, but there we have our little throw pillow. Thank you for joining me on today's workshop. We learned some sewing basics on handheld sewing, as well as learning how to use a sewing machine. Don't forget to subscribe to all of our social media platforms, mainly Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.